So I've just had a week and a half of not doing very much. Actually, it's almost 2 weeks, I think. Who's counting anyway? And when you're not too well, life takes on a whole different feeling. It's like everything around you is moving, and then you in this still space, like nothing much is happening. So the first few days of it, I spent a lot of time doing just silent affirmations because it's a lovely way to keep the mind uplifted. Because you don't really feel like reading very much, you don't feel to concentrate. But I found that I was still able to do affirmations over and over. Thy cosmic current flows in me, you know that affirmation. And it's amazing, how much Paramhansa Yogananda has given us to keep our mind uplifted no matter what. Just because the body is not well does not mean that we have to take our mind with it, right? And when you can keep your mind in that uplifted state, you can more consciously observe what's happening to the body rather than getting all caught up with it. So I did lots of affirmations, and it was just quite nice. In some ways, it was also good that everything just slowed down, because there was so much activity prior to, Asha and her team arriving, and then when they were here, there was just constant activity from morning till night, just about every day. So in some ways, it was nice that everything kind of slowed down. And then gradually, as the days passed, the book pile on my bedside cabinet just kept increasing, to the point where this morning Arun mentioned, so what's happening here? And it's just like I have in my mind, I want to read such and such. So I'll grab that book, not because I want to read the whole book, but there's something in it that I want to read. It might only be a paragraph. And so the book comes on the bedside cabinet, and then there's something else, and then something else. But then more recently, in the last few days, I felt to tune into Whispers from Eternity and Songs of the Soul. That's what it's called, Songs of the Soul. Paramhansa Yogananda wrote a lot of poetry. And I have a special liking for poetry. My name means poetry, by the way. And, poetry is really beautiful use of language. Words that are very accurate, words that the way they are strung together, it's like it just stirs your heart. It expands your mind, it expands your consciousness. As in, poetry goes straight into your feeling self. And what better way to, lift your mind, mental state up than to read poetry from our own Guru. I sometimes wonder how he wrote so much, And so one of the poems that really struck me was, let me see if I can. What's that poem called? Is it City Drum, is it?
City Drum.
City Drum. It is morn I hear, in rolling wheels, the song of a marching world so strong. I love to be roused from silent sleep by the early hum of the active city drum. The drum doth beat to loudly greet all heroes true that would die or do, that meet the morning's foe of worry or of woe with a dauntless smile, and thus success beguile unto the happy camp where peace ever hums its lamp. With noisy hum, the city drum announces true and strong, the world is marching on. And when you're not well and when you're in bed, you kind of really notice the city drum. Like, you first start hearing the birds tweeting, and then because we live on the main road, you hear the cars starting, and little by little it almost kind of rises up in crescendo, and then you can just feel that the world is awake, the world is marching, and then as the day goes by, at the end of the day, once again, it all finishes, and here you are, just very still, nothing is happening in your life, but the world is marching on. And I just thought this is just so beautiful. Don't you think? And even the title, this is the city drum. This is what happens in the city. In the olden days, very olden days, if you wanted to live the um, spiritual life, you would have to go off, and live in a cloistered monastery or go into the forest or the Himalayan mountains. But do you know where Paramhansa Yogananda started his monastery? In a big city, Los Angeles. I mean, you couldn't get bigger than that. And so I can imagine him, like writing this poem, the city drum, as in like, yeah, this is what. But not only that, even where he was born, in Calcutta, where he lived, I mean, these are all busy cities in India. Even Lahiri Mahashaya, he lived in Varanasi, a busy city. Sri Yukteswar lived on the outskirts of Calcutta in Sirampur, which too is a busy city. So our line of masters, apart from Babaji, they all have lived in busy cities. And this is what busy cities are like. It just marches on. And yet, in one sense, nothing very much ever happens. And so this brings us to the next poem. It's called Vanishing Bubbles. I actually really liked Vanishing Bubbles. And before even reading anything about it, what's the image that you get when you think of vanishing bubbles? What is a bubble? A bubble does not have any long enduring reality, right? It's like you blow a bubble, it's there for a few seconds, and pop, it's gone. It vanishes. And yet, when it's there, you notice it. It's so beautiful. It's kind of rainbow colored. It's such a beautiful bubble, and you kind of just, watch and watch. And children just delight in these bubbles, and they want to blow more and more bubbles. And this poem here is really, life is a bit like that, isn't it? Vanishing bubbles. Things that seem so important and so beautiful, and they catch our attention, and then boom, finished, gone. And you think, what was that about? And it becomes very noticeable if you've ever sort of been on a holiday somewhere, either on car road trip or you've gone in an airplane, just before you go, life is so busy, there's so much to do. And all the things in the whole year that you haven't done all of a sudden become urgent and you feel the need to get it all done. And then you are in the car or you are up in the air, in the airplane, and all of a sudden everything kind of just comes to an end. And you kind of think, what was all that about? What was I so busy with? I was listening to a talk by Jyotish and Devi, and they were talking to the Ananda Delhi group about how to live in a big city, how to live a spiritual life in a big city. And one of the questions that had come up was, you know how sometimes we just get into this habit of living a busy, 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 restless kind of a life. And how do you then make a transition when your time comes to kind of, okay, I've earned enough money, I've got more than enough, now I want to dedicate myself to something else. And one of the suggestions that Jyotish gave was take a good 3 months off, like a sabbatical. He called it a spiritual sabbatical. And when you take that amount of time off, then the way you have been living takes on a dreamlike quality. And you think, what was I doing that was so important? But it actually takes time for you to realize that, oh, what I was doing wasn't that important after all. And then you can slowly move into living a different kind of life. But as long as you stay in that busy environment, that habitual restlessness, you think that that's the only way to live. And so let's look at this vanishing bubbles. I really like this poem. Many unknown bubbles float and flow. And you can think of unknown bubbles as just about everything, that happens in our life. It's just an unknown bubble. I mean, yesterday it was like, I had this little baby and now that baby is 25 years old. It's like, and it's all bubbles, right? And all the thoughts, that you entertain in your mind that seem so important at the time. And then, you think, really? What was all that about? And now you can't even remember what were the thoughts that you entertained at the time. And how busy you were, when the children are little with cooking and washing and getting them to places. And then all of a sudden, it's all finished. It's over. And once upon a time, I was at university studying to become something and somebody, and then, boom, it's all finished now. So, many unknown bubbles float and flow, many ripples dance by me and melt away into the sea. I yearn to know, whence they come and whither go. I mean, isn't that what it's like? There's just so much going on in our life, but really, they're just like ripples in the river, ripples in the water. There is no enduring reality. And yet, when we are so caught up in it, it just seems so real. And it seems like there is no other reality. The rain drops and dies. My thoughts play wild and vanish quick. The red clouds melt into the skies. I stake my purse, I'll slave all life, their motive still to seek. Some friends, though not their love, some dearest thoughts I never would lose, I said. And last night's surest stars, seen just above, all are fled. Isn't that also interesting, you know? I mean, night comes, you see all the stars. Morning comes, the stars are all gone. We don't see them anymore. Like everything is just constantly shifting, changing, moving. Is there no reality to our lives? All that I thought was light was but darkness, as it says in the Festival of Light. And so the stars all fled. Crowds of lilies, warbling linnets, perfumed blossoms, honey-mad bees, once met at yonder bowered trees, but now the lonesome field alone is left. The bubbles, the lilies, friends, dramatic thoughts, their parts did play and entertain. And now behind the cosmic screen, their displayed coats to change, they quiet, concealed, remain. So everything is just so ephemeral, right? What is it that we can hold on to for our security? Health too. One day you have, the next day you don't. Children you have today, tomorrow they're grown up and they're living their own lives. Our careers, they are there for a short while and then they are gone. I was reading something that came up on my news feed that thousands of people have lost their jobs because of the new AI technology that has come into the world, and people, many companies feel that, oh, they don't need all these people, you know, content writers and all. AI can do these things for them. So all of a sudden, all these people who were indispensable once upon a time, suddenly their jobs are just gone. I read something about the Waikato University, you know, getting rid of staff in some of the departments in maths, in science. And once upon a time you thought that, you know, those are jobs that are very secure. And then, bang, gone. So where does our true security come from? When everything around you is falling apart, what do you hold on to? And I had a small glimpse of that when I was sick, you know. I held on to what I have received from this path. Not even the books, because I did not even have the concentration to read a book. But the things that I had practiced. I mean, many of the first few days I couldn't even sit down to meditate. And yet there were many things that I could still do. I could still do my affirmations. I could still bring to mind Paramhansa Yogananda. I could still talk to him. I could still pray. And you know, we need to practice these things when it's easy. Because when you're not well, when things are not going right, it's very hard to learn a new affirmation at that point. you'll find that you want to go back to that which you already know. New affirmations take up too much energy and which you don't have. So while you still have good health, good mind, just learn some of these things. Asha has told a story about one of Master's disciples called Kamala Silva. I think she wrote a book called The Flawless Mirror. And towards the end of her life, she was, I think she had dementia. And so she was not very aware of many things. She didn't recognize people or anything. And somebody took her a copy of the autobiography of a yogi. And we all know on the front cover of the autobiography of a yogi is a picture of Paramhansa Yogananda. So what does she do? She rips that cover and she holds that picture to her heart. So I think even when the mind is not functioning in a cognitive way, the heart is still able to feel. And so if we have developed love in our heart, love for God, love for Guru, then no matter whatever happens, nobody can take that away from us. We can hold on to that feeling. When the mind is no longer working, the heart is still able to feel. I was listening to Swami Kriyananda talk about how to love God more. And he was saying that there are more nerves in the heart than there are in the brain. And it's just a matter of cultivating that love. And where does this love come from? I mean, for those of us who are mothers, fathers, you would know that the moment, your child is born, you instantly fall in love with that child. Where does that love come from? And you just want to take care of that child. There could be a third world war going on out there and it wouldn't make any difference to you. All that matters to you is you and this little baby that's in front of you. And you know how fishes live in the water? We live in an ocean of love. And yet we don't know it. Just like a fish might not know that it is sustained by the water that's around it. And it's connected to all the other life forms that are living in the sea by that water. And likewise, we are all connected to each other by the sea of love that's all around us. And how do we love God more? Well, we open our hearts. And it's through God's grace that love enters into our hearts. And so the next poem we're going to look at is there a poem called Breathe in Me?
Breathe in me. Yeah.
Breathe in me the way to love you, that I may learn to faultlessly love you. Pour me the wisdom wine by which I become intoxicated with you. Whisper in my ears of silence the way to be with you always. Speak to my wandering senses and lead them back to your sanctuary within. Call the marauding mind and counsel it how to retrace its steps to your home. With your silent eyes, just look at me, and I will know where to find you. You may hide behind the ocean. You may hide behind delusion. You may hide behind life. You may hide behind dualities. You may hide behind theological conundrums. You may hide behind unanswered prayers, but you cannot hide behind my love, for in the mirroring light of my love, you are revealed. I mean, we have heard that, okay, God is just behind the flowers and behind the ocean and all that. But the direct experience of God is when you experience love. And you know, we all have people in our lives that the moment we even just bring them to our mind, we feel that instantaneous love in our hearts. And just think of, expanding that into something just bigger and bigger and bigger. Like extrapolate that love that you feel for your loved ones into something much bigger. And that's the direct experience of God. And we couldn't love our loved ones had God not planted that love in our hearts. And love is the antidote for everything else. You feel a lot of fear about something, bring love in your heart. The solution to every problem is love. When you're in love, almost nothing else matters. You just kind of like happy being in love with the person that you are in love with. One of the things I did while I haven't been well is watch a few episodes of the Ramayana. There were about 77 or 78 episodes. I'm up to, I think, number 10. And they're about 30 minutes each. And so you've got this Lord Ram. I've only watched the first section of it where he's still he's born and then he's growing up and he gets married to Sita. And he is picking flowers and his eyes fall on Sita. And immediately he falls in love with Sita. Sita falls in love with Ram, and Ram is not able to think of anything else than just this woman that he has fallen in love with, just kind of at first sight. And I just thought it was such a beautiful example of what love is like. And Ram is this noble man, and here he is in love. Can't think of anything other than this woman. And I don't know how much of the Ramayana you are familiar with, but Sita is a daughter of a king as well. And she could only get married. There was something in the family that the person that she would get married to would have to pick up a bow and string it. And so, a lot of people from, nearby kingdoms came because they all wanted to be the bridegroom for Sita, and each one would go and try to pick up the bow, but they just wouldn't be able to lift it because it was just too heavy. And in the finish, Ram comes along and he just picks the bow up, and then Sita throws the garland on him. And just such a beautiful love story, And what's possible when a person really loves somebody? So many others tried picking up that bow, nobody could do it. But Ram, who had already fallen in love with Sita, was able to do it. So it's worth working on cultivating love for God. And in some ways it's not in our hands, but what is in our hands is, one, we can open our hearts, and two, we can trust that if we practice the techniques that we have been given, that our hearts will open to a greater love that's all around us. And when you read poetry, beautiful poetry, you can't help but, it opens your hearts. Swami's songs, just read them as poetry. Every word is so deliberate, and it creates pictures on the screen of your heart. And so, yes, sing Swami's songs, but every now and again, just read the songs as poetry. It opens your heart. And in fact, that's why Master says chanting is half the battle. Half the battle on the spiritual path is how to open your heart. Because otherwise, what is meditation without a heart that's open? It's just playing, with the fancies of your mind. One of the definitions of meditation that we've been given is when the body and mind are still and the heart is open. Often people think that meditation is all about just stilling the mind. But no, actually, it's becoming receptive to the feelings of the heart. In fact, even Whispers from Eternity is another good book to pick up that just opens your heart. In fact, superconscious ideas opens your heart. When you live too much in the conscious realm, the conscious mind likes to kind of divide, analyze, piece things apart, but the superconscious just likes to tie everything together. So one last poem, and I really like that one. It's called The Harvest. I think I've shared this poem before at some point. Does anybody remember? No, not really? I'll tell you what I really like about this poem, The Harvest. There's a particular line in there. It's my favorite. So, could have been a couple of years ago or a year ago. Who knows? One year just melts into another. And we were supplying taro leaves to a cafe. And because they were running a cafe, they needed these leaves on a daily basis. And so when it's kind of the months of December, January, we have a huge supply of leaves. There's no problem. We were able to supply, every day. But then come the months of April, May, when the weather starts getting cold, and every day you think, I'm not sure if we're going to have enough leaves tomorrow to supply this cafe. And then you go out to pick, and yes, you just made it. And then you think, tomorrow, I don't know about tomorrow, whether we're going to get enough leaves or not. And then sure enough, you are still able to find the leaves. And so it was during that period that the meaning of this poem revealed itself to me. So let's read it. Drawn by joy sublime, I watch each harvest time, when furrowed sky glows red with ripe sunbeams, but never have I found thy plowing teams. As in, every morning we would go to pick the leaves would be ready for picking, but we never saw how the leaves grew. Like, where are God's plowing teams? And it really reminded me of the children's book, The Elves and the Shoemaker. The shoemaker was working so hard, and then he goes to bed because he was so tired, and he thinks that he'll wake up in the morning and he'll finish making the shoes, only to find that the shoes were already made. And he thought, ooh, who would have, come and done such a fine job? The shoes are all made. But, isn't that how things grow in the garden? We don't see God's team coming and making things grow, and yet you go the next day and you find, yeah, things have grown. And yet we have done nothing. All we did was just wait. And, do you think that if we just stayed there, out in the garden, we might see some elves come and make the plants grow? So that line is my favorite. But never have I found thy plowing teams. The oriole is a kind of a bird. Glowing painted breast is shown. This bird is a beautiful bird. You can ask Google to show you an image, and it's got this very, very beautiful orange, brighter than this breast. And the oriole's glowing painted breast is shown, and yet thy brush, O painter, never is known. I mean, who painted, that bird with such beautiful orange? We never see God coming and doing the work. The North Star timely leaps, nocturnal watch unfailing keeps. Thy house the sun and seasons supervise, yet thou, O Master, seemest not to rise. So there's all these wonderful things, in this world, but we never see who it is that's the doer. What makes us think that we are the ones doing things in this world? And I think the more we can realize that we are not the doers, but God's energy flowing through us is doing the work, the more we will live with joy. I mean, look at that first line there, drawn by joy sublime. And the more we kind of think that I'm doing this is my work, I did this, and I put all the effort in doing this, the smaller our hearts become. But the more that we feel that, God's working through me, the more our hearts open up, the greater love we feel for God. So relinquish all sense of doership, that I am the one doing this. No, not really. Never have I found thy plowing teams. And so, it's not enough to kind of cognitively know that we are not the doers, but it is something that we need to feel. And in the beginning, it may be that you are affirming that, oh, God is the doer. But at some point, the feeling comes that really, I did not do this. When Swami Kriyananda was asked about all the communities that he had formed, he didn't feel that he formed any of these communities. It's like God did it. And when that feeling comes, it's kind of, you feel that you are living very lightly on this earth. You don't take anything too seriously. Um, if somebody else takes the credit for the work that you have done, so what, you know? After all, who is the doer in any of this? I mean, sometimes I have, looked back and some things that I have written, and I think, gee, I couldn't have written that. And yet you know that you did it. Isn't like some different energy flows through you and it just all happens. The more you want to kind of keep what is mine for myself, we begin to close our hearts. And in that closed hearts, God cannot come. So learn to open your hearts, relinquish the sense of me being the doer. Feel that God working through you is doing it. And read more poetry, because poetry is just beautiful. Beautiful use of language. Amazing, when Master came to the West, he didn't have much English. And for him to write this kind of poetry, it's incredible. And so you can imagine, that I'm thinking of the book Whispers from Eternity. Master calls that a scripture. He says there are 3 scriptures that he likes to read all the time. One is the Bible, the other is the Bhagavad Gita, and the third one, he says, is whispers, because they were just given to him. They flowed through him. Divine Mother gave it to him. All he did was wrote it. So these are superconscious ideas, superconscious thoughts. And when we immerse ourselves in those writings, we stay in that realm of superconscious rather than getting dragged down into this world of the conscious world, the subconscious world. So yeah, pick up Master's poems, read it often, and who knows, which poem just takes your fancy at any one time. And once the meaning of that poem is revealed to you, it never goes away. It's like this harvest, it was revealed to me when we were supplying taro leaves to a cafe, and I still love that poem because it means something. And because of that, the elves and the shoemaker mean something even more. In fact, a lot of children's stories are deeply meaningful. They're not just fairy tales, but they have messages in there. When there's so much work that happens in the night that is not visible to our eyes, so much healing that happens in this body when we, go to sleep. I mean, of our own, we have no ability to heal ourselves. And yet, when we sleep, the body just heals. How does that happen? The plowing teams come, the elves come. So when you start viewing life from that perspective, all of life becomes quite magical. And you start living with that awe and wonder. You become that childlike, a little child asks questions about everything, What is that there in the sky? And what is that? They're just curious about everything. Everything to them is a miracle, which they want to know more about. And we can become like that too. So, that's what I had for you today. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, and our beloved Guru Paramhansa Yogananda, beloved Swamiji, saints and sages of all religions, we humbly bow to you all. Be with us always. We are your children. We need your help. Guide us. Bless us. Om. Peace. Amen.